Welcome to Implement This with Microsoft Business Solutions MVP Britta Rexted and co-host Matthew C. Anderson, where we have an insider's discussion around the things we consider when implementing Dynamics 365. In today's episode, Britta and I discuss gamification, but first we'd like to thank today's sponsor. Inaudic is a leading Microsoft Gold Dynamics CRM ISV delivering best-in-class Dynamics 365 customer engagement solutions, as well as cost-effective and high-quality offshore Dynamics CRM programming services. Inaudic's innovative solutions portfolio includes Maplytics, a premier map visualization, routing, and geoanalytics app for Dynamics 365 customer engagement, Inolink, that offers a seamless integration between QuickBooks and Dynamics 365 customer engagement, and other productivity apps like User Adoption Monitor, Click to Clone, and Click to Export. And now, on with the show. Hey, welcome back. Here we are with another episode of Implement This with Business Solution MVP Britta Rexted and CRM guy Matt Anderson. How's that for introduction?
MVP in the making. Matt, you kind of sound like you're going to be on a game show.
Oh, let's not go there. It's too big of a sidebar.
Okay. Well, but we could talk about gamification, though.
I think gamification sounds like a blast.
Mm-hmm. So I'm finally getting down saying it right, because I've been saying gamification.
Oh.
I don't know why. And one of my students finally corrected me and said, when you say it that way, I always think you mean something with gamma rays. I was like, oh, yeah, you're right. It's a game. It's gamification.
Well, either that or, I mean...
Finally saying it right.
Like, gamification could be all about, like, growing longer legs or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it probably is something. And I don't know what it is, but it's not what we're talking about today. So we'll call it gamification.
Sweet, that'll work for me.
Yeah. Sounds good.
So this is an area where I maybe don't have a whole lot of experience. I've worked a little bit with a third-party tool in the past. Mm-hmm. I've worked with what was formerly known as Fantasy Sales Team a little bit, like in a demo capacity, but I haven't touched it in a while, so I hope you know something about it.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited about it. I've only done what was formerly Fantasy Sales Team, but is now gamification for Dynamics 365, available out on AppSource. Okay. So I've been playing with that since actually the week it went up on AppSource. Mm-hmm. It's kind of one of the fun perks of being an MVP is you get some time with the product team and got to see it early, and I just love it. It's really a lot of fun. Something that's kind of different. So we have the two tools. We have one you can get out on AppSource. It only works if you're online. Kind of comes back to that theme of so many great things out on Azure. They just don't hook up to on-prem at this point. Yeah. So that tool is actually free to use. You just go get it from AppSource, which is really nice. But you have to be online to be able to make it work. So if you're not online, there is that third-party tool. CRM Gamified is another great tool. It's a third-party tool.
That's the third-party one that I had worked with when I mentioned that before.
Yeah. They're great tool. Haven't gotten as much time to play with that one, but what I do like about it, it actually came up in a recent session that I did, is if you want to create games where a user is playing against themselves, maybe they're earning levels or badges, or there's something they're achieving, maybe to show in their first 6 months of using the system what they're knowing. CRM Gamified is much better for that. The gamification tool out on AppSource is specifically for teams. So if you want your sales team to compete against each other, or you want your sales team to compete against your customer service team, or you're going to pit executives and their direct employees against each other, it really is kind of that people versus other people almost, that kind of dynamic. Yeah. And so if you wanted to do something a little more a person beating their own scores or achieving their best on their own, it's not really the right tool for that.
Yeah, so less achievement based, like some of the like badge concepts.
Yeah, exactly. You're having kind of a path for them to go along. Uh-huh. They both do the team or one group versus another group really well. But that's something that CRM Gamified definitely has that personal achievement thing down in a much more concrete way. But what's really interesting about it is it is so much theory. I mean, it's actually fairly easy to set up. But something I think that's a little harder to get to is what specifically do you want to score? Because we have these KPIs, and so we're assigning points based on things that happen in CRM. And it's really important that you're scoring the right thing, because we want to incentivize behavior.
Yeah.
And so I was just talking with Tabitha Sheaver this week. She's really passionate about user adoption. We were talking about, how do you frame this? And what we came up with is that you really want to think about who is your best employee, the one that you would clone if you possibly could. And what are, for example, what are their top 3 habits, their best habits that make them so successful in the role? If you could take those 3 habits and give it to everybody else on their team, what 3 habits would you give them? And getting that down to a very specific level. Is that they make 20 cold calls a day? Is that a certain turnaround time, maybe in responding to emails, or what measurable is it that they consistently hit just by virtue of being them? And how do we want to incentivize everybody else to catch up? So another thing that I find people fall into the trap of a lot is they want to punish bad behavior instead of incentivizing good behavior.
Right.
And these tools are really not designed for that. And that's a whole nother user adoption conversation there about, do you punish people for not using the system or do you reward them for using it? And these tools are all on the positive side. So we're going to stick to the positives today. But that is a temptation. I think every time I talk about gamification, someone brings that up. So I really want to deduct points, or I want to punish people, or I want to, how do I highlight who the loser is, or whatever. Not really what it's set up for. So if you want to go in and implement it, let's say you are online or you're playing around in a trial, you just go to AppSource and put in gamification. Okay. And pretty easy to install. It's gotten easier and easier. They've really done a good job of maximizing AppSource. So this tool has gotten easier and easier to set up. So they'll just install right in your Dynamics environment.
And when you do that, do you need anything special outside of a Dynamics subscription? Or
nope. Okay. You need permission. You have to be a high enough level user. I'm not sure. Obviously, an admin can do it. Yeah. I'm not sure that a customizer can do it. I actually went in for a client, and I didn't have... I think it's that I wasn't an admin on their Office 365. I thought I could do it on my own, and there was something... I'm trying to remember what it is now that I hit. So I'd say to be safe, you have to have enough permission within Office 365 to actually go to AppSource and pick a solution, and then enough permission in CRM to set it up.
Yeah. Okay.
And once you do that, it pulls all of the stuff in your CRM. We actually see about 30 workflows show up, some custom workflow activities, brings in some at work, our KPIs. So we set those up in CRM. And we actually don't assign the points for them in CRM. We're just saying, what do we want to measure? So what are those good habits that we're trying to track? And it gives us about 10 out of the box you play with. Some things are really obvious, like converting a lead to an opportunity. Obvious KPIs. Completing a task, making a phone call, the obvious ones. You very quickly get into things that are a little bit more complex. You probably want to make your own. And so I've had a lot of fun with playing around how specific can I get in tracking these KPIs. And it really comes down to change tracking. So you can do it on custom entities, but you need a change event to happen in your system for it to score. Okay. And so think of things that have a timestamp naturally. So an appointment, a task ending, so it has that actual end. Things like that are really low-hanging fruit. Anything else, or let's say you wanted to score a point off the change in a field. Rick McCutcheon and I ran into this. We set up a big game, and he has these beautiful mapped out sales processes. Have you ever seen any of his flowcharts? Yeah, they're really, really cool, very detailed. They really understand sales process. And so we were trying to map his whole sales process. And a lot of that was scoring points off of very specific fields when they're updated. And that's not a change event in the way that the KPIs are looking for it. Okay. So what we actually had to do, I created a custom entity I called tracker, but you could call it whatever you want. Essentially something to get generated by a workflow when I wanted points to happen. Okay. So then what I could do is I could have a workflow watching for, fire off the change in that field or something that wasn't a pure change event, create that record, and then I had it for scoring. For CRMUG Summit this year, shout out to Ed Gonzalez for helping me set up a really cool flow. We were watching a group of users, their Twitter accounts, and every time they tweeted with the hashtag CRMUG Summit, we created a tracker, and then that was scoring points. Oh. So it doesn't necessarily have to be things inside of CRM. Sure. Flow really made that very easy, as long as I could get to it in Flow. So Twitter, very available in Flow. Yep. then we were just creating those custom records and then scoring off of those.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah, so you can hack it that way. What I would say, though, is if you're doing a really complex process, like Rick's full sales process, we found in that case it was better to use a tool like North 52 or something with code, because very quickly you have just a bazillion workflows running, and it's not the best for performance. So we found if you're going to have really, really, really complex processes, you either want something with code, you just don't want a whole bunch of workflows that run on all these fields.
Yeah.
Kind of got out of hand quickly.
Yeah.
So North 52 was a great fix for that. Flow has just been, as always, a lot of fun to play with. And then what's interesting, I haven't ever seen this before. I'm curious if you have. I can't think of anywhere else in CRM we use a personal view for something at a system level. Can you think of anything else like that?
Not off the top of my head. No.
I'm trying to think of a time that I've ever done that. There's times that I, like as an admin, I'd make a personal view and then share it with the team and kind of hack it that way. But what's really interesting in KPIs is that I can set up what I'm looking for. So on tasks, I want to have the KPI be on that change event of marking complete, and then I want to assign the points maybe to the owner of the task, or I could also tag team it and say both the owner and the creator of the task both get points when it gets completed. Sure. And then if I want to filter further, let's say I want to get really specific, I use a personal view. Huh. Which I've never seen that before. And it works just fine, maybe because I'm the system admin, and so I can't leave. I don't know what it is that role has to be there forever. Yeah. Probably some, just got to think about legacy planning there, making sure that view doesn't go away. Right. If you change admins or whatever, but kind of interesting. Another question I've gotten is it tied to goals? Because it kind of feels like goals when you're setting it up. And to the best of my knowledge, they're not related at all. Okay. So the thought process you'd use for setting up goals is fairly similar, but the tools aren't related.
Yeah, and so then conceivably you could use both goals as well as gamification then, and not have them conflict with each other. You're not sacrificing one for the other. Absolutely. If you want to use both.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. And you might be using goals for longer term tracking. There's plenty of reasons I think you'd still want to keep both in the mix. So you're not limited there at all. So once you've got your KPI set up, then you go in and there's a portal.
And I want to jump back before we get to the portal just on the KPIs, because I want to go back to something you mentioned early on, which is, you look for that shining star who you want everyone to emulate the things that they do. But as you're going through that, talking about some of the other particular things that you have, it has to be tied to a specific type of event inside of CRM. All of a sudden, some of those things, those behaviors, it becomes a little more difficult to tie the exact behavior to that simple trackable thing through the system.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You need to think about what specifically you want to incentivize. Don't just score the things that are easy to score. Yeah. You don't want people to use CRM for the sake of using CRM. And sometimes when we get into scoring user adoption, we just want proof they were in there. And it's hard to communicate the value of CRM and actually get the ROI if people just have to prove they showed up to work today.
Yeah, well, and as a former salesperson before I got into CRM consulting, having those types of things where it felt like I was just going and doing extra, effectively busy work to put that information in to prove that I'm doing the right things or going to employ it kind of gets frustrating, which is almost counter to the concept of using gamification, which should make it kind of competitive and fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So part of it, I think, is looking far enough upstream of what it is. If you know that your salespeople need to make 100 cold calls this week so that they will hopefully get 20 appointments, so that of those 20 appointments, that usually means they can close 5 deals. We know that, let's say for the average person at your company, 100 cold calls equals about 5 deals down the pipeline. Then you want to be adding in points for those 100 calls. It's the behaviors that create progress, because the end result kind of scores itself. It's obvious how many deals they won, and you can score that kind of thing. But life is already probably rewarding them in commission and other things for that.
Hopefully.
And then there's an opportunity here to level set a little better. So if you have, let's say you have junior execs they're really hustling. I mean, they're showing up early, they're really hitting the phones and doing everything that they need to do. Maybe they're not landing the whale of the client yet. So they're not showing up on the commission board with these crazy numbers, but they're doing all the hard work. You want to make sure you're rewarding the hard work, not just the end result, because that's going to be different. Someone has really good territory, their numbers might be higher, but someone can still win the game by doing the grind. So it's those behaviors that you want to reinforce, and also think about, it comes back to that user adoption rule that we always have to follow, is that we're really doing a process in CRM. It's not using CRM for CRM's sake. There's something we're trying to accomplish. And the best user adoption success stories always come out of CRM being so integral to how your company does business that you just literally can't do your job without it. When I've talked to people who have really high success, they've said, it's so important. You have to use CRM for your job. It's an HR problem if you don't, because you're not doing your job if you're not in there. And so that's something to think about here. It's not, gamification doesn't solve that. I think you'll be able to tell how closely you've tied your core business processes to CRM by how easy or how hard it is to write some KPIs.
Okay.
Kind of.
All right. Well, thanks for indulging me. We can get on to the portals piece.
Okay. So the portal piece is pretty easy. We set up these KPIs in CRM. We go into the portal, and then that's where you actually add points. So you might have a simple KPI around closing tasks, but then in one particular game, maybe for your beginner users, points are worth a lot more, and then for maybe a more senior game, points aren't worth as much. So closing a task might be worth 10 points in one game and 5 points in another. You get a lot of control over that. You can also set a floor on it. So let's say someone has to make 20 cold calls a day just to do their job. You could start scoring at call 21.
Okay.
So you don't just have to give points for everything. And you can put caps on it too. Sometimes you want to be careful that someone can't run away with maybe they have one thing they're really good at. Maybe they love sending email, but they're terrified to pick up the phone. You don't want them to be able to win every week by never picking up the phone. So maybe you cap certain points, people are going to lean heavy on, so they don't overdo it. And then something we also pick in games, there's a couple different styles of games, which is kind of interesting. And this is where that psychology of building a good winnable game comes in. There's different ways to do it. So one would just be no teams at all. You just have individuals playing. That's really simple, and if you're having a hard time getting buy-in, you might want to start there. It's really kind of intuitive and obvious. And sometimes you don't have an obvious team structure within your company, or maybe you don't want to reinforce that structure. Maybe you want to, make it a little different. Another thing you can do is just having a set team. So classic, East versus West, or two departments against each other. And what's interesting there too is you can line people up so that, because there's different positions you can set within the game, so that it's a fair fight. Maybe take the two top salespeople and pit them against each other, and then at other positions there's maybe juniors are playing against juniors or things like that.
Okay.
And then something that is interesting, and I'm curious if you use this when you played with fantasy sales team, is that fantasy draft kind of bit. And that's like fantasy sports, like fantasy football or fantasy baseball, where people in the company are drafting a team. Yeah,
so conceptually, it got to a place where it was really difficult to try going down that path.
It's a little overwhelming.
I think people understand a concept like fantasy football when they're playing fantasy football, but when all of a sudden it's people inside of their organizations in these kind of equated to positions, it was a difficult concept for people to grasp. And even in setting up a demo scenario to be able to explain it, it became just kind of confusing for people in general. So I was not actually able to get anywhere with that.
And you don't want to people only have so much they can learn at a time, and you don't want to spend that training energy trying to get them to learn how a fantasy game, we just want them to play the game, we don't want to spend too much time learning it.
Yep.
So that situation's a little harder. Where I do think it's cool is if you have a game where certain people in the organization are drafting the team. I do see the psychology win if you're on the CEO's team that week, you're going to make sure you don't make them look bad. And so there is some investment if you're on someone's team. I think you behave a little differently. Hopefully, that's kind of the thought behind it. But it is a little complex to set up.
I'd love to see some sort of machine learning based like box score following up on like how good of a team different managers picked and trying to come up with I don't know, just like some sort of narrative. I've seen some cool stuff in actual fantasy sports around who was picked and why, and kind of what the difference makers were in each of the different matchups. But certainly, I mean, haven't seen that in this solution, but I think that could be, I don't know, fun/cool in the future sometime.
Yeah, definitely. A question that I got recently is, can I surface the results of a game somewhere else? Like, can I show that in Power BI, for example? And I don't know where you would do that. I haven't seen where I can get access to that data.
Okay.
So the answer is yes, with a voice that goes up at the end, probably an asterisk next to it, because it's all CRM data. So you could score it in gamification and then also use that same data because you know how your leads are closing, you know all these things are happening, and then also show that in Power BI if you wanted something a little sparklier, shinier.
Yeah.
I would say I like the CRM gamified UI better for when someone's winning.
Okay.
There is a leaderboard concept, and you can put it up on a TV for the tool that we can get from AppSource. But the one from CRM Gamified is pretty cool. I mean, it really makes good use of TVs around the office. Yeah,
that was a big focus in the implementation that we did. I know we focused a lot here on kind of the sales scenarios, but this was actually a call center scenario. And it made sense. Like, everyone was kind of physically in the same spaces. It was spread out across multiple rooms, but having those boards where they're used to having a screen that shows, hold times that people have had, and then you've got another screen, or you kind of flip in between to see who is atop the leaderboard for the different games that were going on.
You can do things now like play their song when they win, or you can have things flash on the screen, or if you hit certain metrics, it really is very programmable. I think that's pretty sparkly shiny. Now, if your team's spread out or everyone works from home, I mean, it really depends on your environment. But something like that, like a bullpen scenario where everybody's in a general area, really, there's some cool uses of TVs now.
Yeah.
Because really, this is just about energy. I mean, you're trying to get energy and trying to incentivize people. There's some psychology in here. That's really the point of it. So, interesting things that you can do.
Cool. So with that, I don't think I have any specific other questions around it. It sounds like just go to AppSource if I want to check it out, probably install on a test org to begin with. But do you, if you were going to try to test it out, how many people do you need to test it out and have it make sense? As an admin, could I actually drive any value or even be able to show what it might look like, or would I need to have a handful of people who are on board with trying to do some things in the system to generate a leaderboard?
Well, one idea that I think is kind of interesting is setting it up and running it before you tell anybody it's running. And there are some automatic emails that go out. You just want to make sure those are shut down over on the portal side. But you might want the before and after snapshot of what a quarter or a month looked like when people didn't know they were playing the game, and then how much it advanced. That's one way to look at it. I would say with a really small group, 5 people is a great way to do it. Find somebody's team, or maybe just a group of people, maybe power users, someone that you can play with at first. Although you can score it without them knowing they're playing. I mean, you just to kind of get the hang of it. One other thing I forgot to mention you'll see in there is there are Excel-based games, which is kind of interesting. That doesn't change the requirement, though, that every player needs to be a user in that CRM org. Okay. So I'd really hope that would be the way for on-premise customers use it, and it's not. It doesn't get it done. Okay. So, but I think Flow is more fun for using that outside data anyway, personally, even though I do love Excel. So I think that's it. Go play with it and be interested to hear what people find along the way. It's really kind of an up-and-comer of the topics.
Cool.
I think it's exciting.
All right. Sounds good to me. I'm excited.
Me too.
All right. Until next time.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep. Thank you. You've been listening to Implement This with Britta Rexted and Matthew C. Anderson. Do you have a business problem you'd like us to discuss on the show? Reach us through our website, implementthis.org, where you can also subscribe to the podcast. We're on Twitter too. Britta is at MacGyverCRM, and I'm at MC Anderson. Thanks so much for listening.